Overwatch is a fun game. It's my favorite game at the moment, and the fact there have been 25 million copies sold in around a year is a great testament to its popularity. There have been tournaments, live events, and much more that have made it a mainstay esports title. The only problem is that it graphically pushes the boundaries of what an esports title can be. Stuff like CSGO, League of Legends, and other popular titles can run just fine on the vast majority of computers, but not Overwatch. Trying to run Overwatch on integrated graphics will leave you needing to make compromises in either FPS, resolution, or in many cases both. So because of all this, I gave myself a challenge over the past few days to build a no-compromise Overwatch Gaming PC for as cheap as possible. So a PC that can run Overwatch at 1080p, at least medium settings at a locked 60 FPS for as cheap as possible. After looking at what parts I had on hand and scouring sites like Craigslist and eBay, I set my budget to $150. Something to keep in mind is that this will be using secondhand parts to keep the price down, but the $150 does include the price of the operating system, so there is that. I wasn't able to include the price of a keyboard or mouse, but head on down to your local thrift or secondhand store and you should easily be able to find a basic keyboard and mouse for under $5 combined. So a lot of people watching this might think that sourcing all the individual parts for a PC that can run Overwatch for $150 would be an impossible task, and in many cases I would agree, but what I and others have found is that if you're wanting to build a gaming PC and you're on a very tight budget, then the best way to do that is to, instead of buying all the individual parts that make up a PC, is to buy a pre-built OEM PC like an HP or Dell and upgrade it to fit your needs, and that's exactly what I did. What I started out with was a pre-built HP Pavilion SlimLine PC, which I picked up for right around $70. Now, I normally wouldn't recommend small form factor PCs as they don't allow for full-size graphics cards, but I had a solution going into this, so everything worked out fine. Now, what's nice about getting a pre-built is for one price I was able to get a CPU, motherboard, cooler, RAM, and a hard drive, and it even came with a Windows 7 key which could be used to activate Windows 10. All I needed to add was a graphics card, an upgraded power supply, and a case to fit all of the components. The CPU that came with the pre-built was an Intel Core i5-2400S. This is a quad-core processor based on Intel's Sandy Bridge architecture. It's a low-power version of the ever-popular Core i5-2400 and can turbo up to a respectable 3.3 GHz. The CPU is sitting in a generic HP motherboard supporting LGA 1155 CPUs and DDR3 RAM. The CPU is being cooled by a basic OEM cooler, which stays fairly quiet even when under intense load. For RAM, the system came with 8GB of DDR3 memory at 1333 MHz. This is great as 8GB is starting to move from the standard to the minimum of what a gaming PC should have if you're wanting to run modern titles, even stuff like Overwatch. The HP SlimLine also came with a 250GB Western Digital Blue hard drive, which while not very big is still plenty of room for the operating system as well as a decent number of games and programs. And the fact it's 7200 RPM means it should be decently fast and snappy. So once I had the base system, the next thing I knew I should look for is a graphics card. Looking around on eBay and Craigslist, I found this 2GB HD 7850 on eBay for just under $60, which is a pretty good deal. The HD 7850 is still a very good card for light to moderate gaming at 1080p. Just something to note that if you do plan on getting an HD 7850, make sure to get the one with 2GB of VRAM. The versions with 1GB of VRAM are essentially unusable in modern games, as VRAM usage in modern games is much higher than when this card first came out. The HD 7850 isn't a particularly power-hungry card, but it does require a 6-pin PCIe power connector, which meant I needed a more robust power supply than what came with the HP SlimLine PC. What I ended up with was a 450-watt Cooler Master power supply I picked up from eBay for a little over $8. Though this power supply is a little old, it arrived to me in like-new condition and was too good of a deal to pass up. The PSU will provide more than enough clean power to the entire system, and the fact it has a 6-pin PCIe power connector means it'll work just fine with the HD 7850. The only real downside to it is that it's not modular and the cables are of all different colors. Finally, I needed a place to house all of these parts. Because the base HP Pavilion was a small form factor PC, this meant only half height or low profile graphics cards would fit and still allow the case to shut. This is where a recent garage sale pickup came in handy. I picked up this full single-core PC from a garage sale for only $5. The people who sold it thought it was broken, and when I got it home, I tinkered around with it for a while and confirmed there was a hardware failure of some sort within the machine. But the good news is that even if it was just the case, I still would have paid $5, as this case, even though it is pretty old, supports MATX standard and even features an inverted layout, which is something interesting to see and something you don't see too often. So once I had all the parts, it was just a matter of putting it all together. This was pretty easy, and the only issue I ran into with was front panel connectors. Both had different standards, but I was able to get the front USB, front audio, and the power button working, which is all you really need. Once everything was assembled, I installed Windows 10 and downloaded a bunch of games to be tested, with the most noteworthy of them being Overwatch, of course. So loading up Overwatch at 1080p medium settings, I was able to get a locked 60 FPS, which is great because at medium settings, Overwatch both looks and performs great. Bumping up the settings to high resulted in an average in the upper 50s, which isn't bad, but I'll take a locked 60 FPS with slightly lower detail to better looking but more choppy alternative. So Overwatch was the main focus of this build, but I decided to test a few other games to see how they perform. The next game I decided to test was GTA 5. With a mix of settings between medium-high, I was able to achieve an average of 52.1 FPS with a low of 45. This looked and performed really well. It's games like GTA 5 where you'll be happy that you got the 2GB 7850 over the 1GB version. The next game tested was Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor, and at the high preset I achieved an average of 55.4 FPS. Though this is a slightly older title, it's still one of my favorite games and is still a game I like to use for benchmarking purposes. Finally, the last game I decided to test was CSGO. At 1080p max settings, I was able to achieve an average of 120.7 FPS with a low of 102 FPS. Overall, this PC performs really well, and I'm very happy with how it turned out. Going used and being persistent looking for deals has once again paid off. I actually have a couple videos on how I find these parts, and I'll link those videos in the description down below. Also, let me know what budget you think I should try to build a PC for in the comment section down below, along with your thoughts on this video. So yeah guys, I think this wraps this video up. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up, as well as consider subscribing for more PC and tech related content in the future. And as always, this is Matt from Tech by Matt, signing out.